Prometheus is an enormous ocean liner that embarked on a week-long journey 4 months ago. Since then, the ship, along with its 2,000 passengers, has vanished without a trace. This incident has sparked a major scandal across Europe because several well-known high-profile figures were traveling, and first-class speculations about the ship's fate are spreading throughout the continent, but all efforts to locate it have failed. The opening scene introduces us to a woman named Mora, who is seen sprinting through the halls of a mental institution. She's fleeing from her father, accusing him of being responsible for her brother's suffering. Mora vaguely references a missing ship and accuses her father of causing the deaths of many. The ship she is referring to is Prometheus. In the following moment, Mora awakens, convinced it was just a nightmare. However, marks on her wrist from her time in the asylum suggest otherwise. While Mora remembers parts of what happened, most of it remains foggy, as if her recent memories have been erased. Currently, she is aboard another ship traveling from England to America. This vessel is also on a 7-day journey with over 1,000 passengers on board. In first class are the wealthy, while the middle and lower classes include refugees, criminals, and drifters. Those in the lowest compartment have shared spaces and limited food, whereas the first class passengers dine on the finest cuisine. But no one knows that each person aboard harbors a hidden secret. First class might be hiding their fair share of rotten personalities. Mora is one of the first class travelers and is here because she received a letter a few days back. The letter was from her brother, urging her to meet him in New York and claiming that he knows the truth about their father's deeds. This is the very reason Mora is aboard the ship, even though she is unwell and mentally fragile. She glances into the mirror, reminding herself of her own name to avoid forgetting if someone addresses her. In the dining area, there's a newlywed couple, Lucien and Laura. Their marriage was arranged by their families, leaving them without love. Lucien, instead, is drawn to a Japanese escort on board. Meanwhile, this escort is traveling with her mother, both dressed in traditional Japanese kimonos, but speaking Cantonese. They are, in fact, pretending to be Japanese to secure better opportunities abroad. Mora is seated alone until a woman named Miss Eve joins her. Eve, who owns the escort, is taking her to America to sell her to a brothel. Mora becomes irritated as Eve pries into her life, but a man interrupts. He is a lower-class worker, forbidden from interacting with first-class passengers. Desperate, he asks if there is a doctor on board, as his sister is critically ill. In the lower compartments, guards remove the man, but Mora follows them, revealing that she is a trained doctor. Since the other doctors are preoccupied with their own meals, Mora heads to the lower deck to assist the pregnant woman. Despite initial doubts from others, the woman's younger sister places her trust in Mora. When the woman's pain subsides, Mora's skills are validated, and she quietly exits. At this point, she encounters the ship's captain. He tragically lost his wife and daughters in a fire 2 years ago and is still grieving their loss. The captain and Mora converse briefly before his assistants interrupt. They inform him that a signal has been received from a nearby location providing coordinates. The captain suspects that the signal might be coming from the missing ship, determined to investigate. The captain disregards the passengers' objections and turns the ship around. Mora approaches him, asking if he believes anyone on the missing ship could still be alive after 4 months. The captain admits it's unlikely, but hopes they might have rationed their supplies and survived. After Mora leaves, he retrieves an envelope similar to the one Mora received from her brother, but this one is from someone named Isle. Later, he addresses the first-class passengers, informing them of his decision to steer the ship toward the coordinates. Though most are displeased, the captain remains resolute. After several hours, they finally reach the location and confirm that the lost ship is indeed there. The captain orders his crew to lower a lifeboat and selects a group to join him in boarding the vessel. The team includes 2 lower-class men, Oleg and Jerome Mora, and a few others to stand guard. Upon boarding the abandoned ship, they're startled to find it empty, not a single body in sight, and the entire ship seems deserted. The captain is perplexed, especially since the equipment that could have sent the signal is damaged beyond use. Suddenly, Mora spots a beetle crawling across the floor and decides to follow it. The insect leads her to a room near a locked cabinet. Carefully opening it, Mora is stunned when a small boy emerges. The child remains silent and expressionless, clutching a peculiar pyramid. The group is left questioning how he survived, but they eventually bring him back to their ship. Mora agrees to keep the boy safe in her room and look after him, given her medical background. That night, a man who appears to have swum from the lost ship covertly boards the Kerberos. The next morning, all the compasses on the ship stop functioning. Passengers worry they may face the same fate as those on the missing vessel, and even the captain seems uncertain of what to do. Meanwhile, Mora is occupied with caring. She returns to her room with food, only to find a stranger standing outside her door. It turns out to be the man who boarded from the lost ship. The man quickly moves to another door and explains he heard noises from her room and wanted to check on her. He introduces himself as Daniel, her neighbor. Mora feels she might recognize him and asks if they've met before, but he brushes off her question and enters his room later. Mora tries to ask the boy about his presence on the ship, but he stays silent and hands her the strange pyramid he was holding. It seems he's attempting to convey something, but Mora struggles to understand. At the same time, the captain suspects that everything involving the lost ship might be linked to the ship company. Before the voyage, he received a letter from the company with just 2 words: sink ship. He believes the company wants them to sink the lost ship to cover up its wrongdoing. His staff thinks he's reading too much into things. The captain is urged to make a decision, as both the passengers and crew are beginning to question his authority, since the ship remains idle. Under these conditions, his mental state worsens, and he starts hearing his daughter singing. Following the sound, he arrives at the room where his wife and daughters died. It is revealed that the fire that took their lives was no accident. His wife set it intentionally to end her life and their daughters' lives. The captain might have benefited from playing Jenga with his family more often, or whatever activities people enjoyed back then. He tries to speak to his family, but his wife ignores him, leading their children away and leaving only his eldest daughter behind. She urges her father to return, and then bursts into flame. This jolts the captain back to reality. When he opens his eyes, he's startled to find himself in a hidden compartment beneath his bed. Despite knowing the ship well, he never realized this compartment existed. Determined, the captain decides to bring the lost ship back to shore. Since they don't have enough coal to tow it to America, their only option is to return to England. Elsewhere, Mora discovers a tattoo on the boy's neck that matches the symbol on the envelope she received. She confides in the boy that her brother has been missing for the past 4 months, and she had no idea where he was until she received the letter. The symbol holds deep significance to her, and she wants the boy to explain its meaning. The boy listens intently and begins to cry, but he remains silent. After Mora leaves her neighbor, Daniel appears outside her door once more. This time he releases a beetle from his palm, similar to the one found on the lost ship. The insect turns and scuttles down the hallway. A young girl from the lower-class passenger finds the beetle, follows it, and encounters Daniel. He apologizes to her, and the scene cuts abruptly. Meanwhile, the captain informs the passengers that they are heading back to England, which leaves everyone displeased. People begin to protest, but the captain stands firm in his decision, refusing to back down. Mora follows him to the deck and questions him about what's happening. He explains the sink ship message he received from the ship's company. He also suspects that both he and Mora were brought on board for a purpose, noting that she received a similar letter. Later, the body of the young girl is discovered, and a male doctor is summoned to determine the cause of her death. Dismissing the situation, he states, "She died of natural causes as she was unwell." Mora challenges his judgment, but he disregards her with disrespect. This doctor's only expertise seems to be in sexism. Suddenly, the captain is alerted to the dense fog that now surrounds the ship. Until this point, they had been using the sun for navigation, but with the fog enveloping them, determining direction becomes challenging. Back in his room, the captain shows Mora a ribbon that belonged to his daughter. He reveals that he found the ribbon on the lost ship and suspects his family was on board despite them having died long ago. Together, Mora and the captain decide to return to the lost ship to examine the captain's logs and uncover more about the vessel's fate. As they prepare to lower the lifeboat, they are intercepted by the head of security, who is displeased with the captain's decision to head back to England and fears his fixation on the lost ship might endanger them all. Undeterred, the captain lowers the boat. After they depart, the head of security and the captain's second-in-command decide to stir unrest among the passengers. The head of security visits the lower-class passengers and informs them of the young girl's death, inciting them against the captain and encouraging them to protest. Since the lower-class passengers can't afford a second ticket, they're strongly against returning to England. Soon after, 3 more bodies are discovered on the ship with causes of death similar to the young girl. This fuels their anger, and they prepare to stand up for their rights. Meanwhile, the captain and Mora reach the lost ship and search through a room. They find that almost all official documents have been burned in the fireplace, but the captain manages to retrieve a single unscathed sheet with a list of the ship's passengers. They also find a peculiar electric board on the wall. The captain explains that it's a recent addition from last year designed to measure steam pressure. Suddenly, he realizes that the device serves no actual purpose, indicating it must have a hidden function. This discovery alarms him, as their ship has the same device, reinforcing his suspicion that the shipping company may be involved in the mysterious disappearances and death. Things take a twist when the captain notices Mora's name on the passenger list of the lost ship elsewhere. The Japanese woman stands by the sea, lost in thought. Lucien, the recently married man, approaches her, attempting to strike up a conversation, but she walks away, not interested. However, this interaction doesn't escape the attention of her handler. Eve approaches Lucien with an offer, agreeing to let him spend the night with the woman for a substantial fee. Later, Eve checks to ensure her companion is ready and discovers she's actually a virgin. A flashback reveals that her mother had worked in a brothel. Once the most prized worker was offered a chance for a new life abroad. However, jealousy arose, leading to her tragic end, and others took her place on the ship. Understanding her fate, the young woman accepts the deal with Lucien accepting her mother's path. Night falls and Lucien lies to his wife, saying he wants to sleep in a different room. As he prepares to meet the young woman, he intentionally skips his medication. Unfortunately, this leads to a seizure. Just as the woman begins to undress, it's revealed that Lucien's medication, which controls his seizures, also causes impotence, putting him in a difficult bind. Back on their ship, the captain inspects the document he retrieved and is shocked to see Mora's name listed among the passengers of the lost vessel. This raises unsettling questions. If she was aboard that ship, how did she return, and what secrets is she hiding? Daniel approaches Mora, inquiring about her thoughts on the captain. Though Mora finds the question odd, she answers that she trusts the captain, entirely admiring his resilience and commitment to the passengers. Meanwhile, the lower-class passengers gather weapons intent on commandeering the ship and heading to America. Before the captain can be warned, he finds himself outnumbered and trapped by those rebelling. Simultaneously, Daniel attempts to activate the strange device the captain saw earlier on the other ship. The captain and a few allies are locked in a cabin with their hands tied, while the head of security discovers the compass is finally working again. Upon checking their position, the crew is stunned. They've somehow ended up exactly where they were 3 days prior, when they first changed course. Even the most seasoned sailors are baffled, as the ship has been moving steadily ever since. Amid this, the rebels confront a staff member, demanding an explanation for the recent deaths. Fearfully, the crew member explains everything since the ghost ship's signal. When the group learns that the mysterious deaths began after the boy was rescued, they blame him, convinced he's the source of a deadly disease. Enraged, the mob sets out to find and kill the boy. First, the protesters check Mora's room but find it empty after confirming that the boy isn't there. They lock Mora inside and move on to search the other room, growing increasingly worried about the child. Mora hears a noise coming from under her bed. She investigates and discovers a hidden compartment, much like the one beneath the captain's bed. To her relief, the boy emerges from the compartment looking a bit like a mischievous imp. Meanwhile, the protesters systematically lock the first-class passengers in their room. As Mora struggles to pick her lock, the boy observes her. He then produces a beetle, which magically unlocks the door from the outside. Stunned, Mora doesn't have time to process this. They need to escape. They race to the lifeboat, where they reunite with the captain and his allies. He reveals he escaped his confinement by crawling through a vent, and now they plan to flee in the lifeboat. Mora tries to join them, but the captain hesitates, having seen her name on the ghost ship's passenger list. Just as they're about to lower the lifeboat, the protesters arrive and seize the boy, preparing to sacrifice him. The rain begins to pour as they prepare for the grim act, and while he resembles something out of a horror film, he seems oddly calm, as if resigned to his fate. Moments before they harm him, the captain and his supporters intervene. A chaotic fight breaks out, resulting in injuries on both sides. Mora desperately tries to reach the boy, but a woman throws him overboard just as she gets close. Later, the captain's group tends to their wounds in the lobby. Mora is still reeling from the shock and horror of losing the boy with whom she had formed a bond. Fed up, the captain confronts her, accusing her of playing ignorant. He shows her the names listed on the manifest from the lost ship, leaving her in disbelief, as she has no memory of being aboard. Just as she attempts to discredit the document, a noise from a nearby cupboard catches everyone's attention. In stunned silence, they watch as the little boy steps out of the cupboard holding the same strange pyramid he had on the lost ship. The episode concludes with him walking over to Mora and embracing her to find out what happens next. Watch the second part